Good evening, everyone. Thanks for those of you who have joined in person as well as online. Would like to reconvene the Thursday, December 9th meeting of the Lake Forest Board of Education. As usual, would you please join me with the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by a moment of silence.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We'll begin this evening with roll call of board members. Mrs. McCloskey.
Here.
Mrs. Starkey.
Here.
Vice President Rao.
Here.
And President Earl Dempsey serving as chair, as present as well. Mr. Philip Thomas was unable to join this evening. We had 4 board members present. Thank you all for being here. Move on to 2.4, approval of agenda, Mr. Rao.
Make a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
Second.
That motion on the floor properly seconded. Any questions or discussion on that motion? Seeing none, we'll move to a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries 4-0.
2.5 approval of minutes. I make the motion we approve the meeting minutes from November 18th as written.
Second.
That motion on the floor properly seconded. Any questions or discussion on that motion? Seeing none, we'll move to a vote. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions?
Abstain.
Motion carries 3-0 with 1 abstention. We're on to item 2.7, citizens participation. Opportunity each meeting for members of the public to address the board. We do ask if anyone was wishing to address the board, they completed a form indicating such and hand that to the superintendent's office. Do we have anyone?
No.
Do not have anyone signed up this evening. With that said, we will close public comment and it will reopen at our next meeting in January. Move on to section 3, reports. We start with 3.1, strategic plan report. Dr. Lucas.
Thank you, President Dempsey. Good evening, everybody. This is our update on our strategic planning that we're required to give per our policy for this month. And we've been focusing our work on where we want our district to be in 5 years and how we're going to get there. If you could scroll down. Thank you, Ms. Bigelow. Just wanted to give you a kind of a graphic depiction of the framework that we have undertaken this work. We're basing everything basically on our vision, mission, and belief statements. We created our portraits for success. Then we kind of divided our work into 3 priority areas, and we've broken up to 3 subcommittees that are working in our priority areas. And we're in the 4th quarter now, I like to say, where we're developing our goals and action steps. So just a reminder, our priority areas, academic success for every student, partnerships with families, communities, and businesses, and school facilities, culture, and climate. And then I am going to hand this off to Mr. James Dick, our Chief Academic Officer, who's going to talk about priority 1, academic success for every student. Mr. D.
All right, try to be pretty quick here, but give you an overview of what the subcommittee's been working on. We'll talk process first. So we met with committees of the whole, and like Dr. Lucas said, we broke down into subcommittees. You can see the meeting dates at the bottom. One of the first steps we did was take our old strategic plan and we all combed through it. What's working, what's not working, what do we want to keep, what do we need to totally course adjust on. So from there, we established goals. See here, goal 1, goal 2, and goal 3. I'll go over each of them in a second. So one of our meetings was really spent, all right, are these goals all encompassing where we can put action steps and then future metrics underneath so we can measure our progress. And then from there, we met again and we just brainstormed action steps. How do we, if we meet this goal in X amount of years, what action steps are we going to have to take to get there? We're also working on metrics now to be able to demonstrate that we're meeting those action steps. So we landed on 3 goals. Goal 1, all students possess necessary literacy and mathematical skills in all content areas to be college and or career ready. by providing rigorous, high-quality, differentiated instruction aligned to national and state standards. And you can see down there that action steps 1 is making sure that there's high-quality instruction going on in every classroom. Now, under each of these action steps, these are large action steps. There'd be a bunch of sub-action steps that lead up to them. But then the second one has to deal with all of the programs that we're putting in. First one's instructions. The second one, or do we have standards aligned programs? Are we teaching the right stuff in the classroom? And then the third one is to provide differentiated instructions and interventions to close the achievement gaps. The kids, even though we have high quality instruction, there's always going to be some kids that are falling behind for whatever reason. Do we have a plan to get those kids back up to speed? Goal 2, continuously track data that measures the academic success of all students and utilize data-driven instruction for student growth. First one, collecting and assessing, and most importantly, disaggregating student performance on state and district assessments. Kind of drives back into goal number 1, how we're carrying this stuff out. Is it working? And then the second one, collect and analyze benchmark and progress monitoring data to drive something that we call the multi-tiered systems of support. That's how we provide the interventions to the kids, whether it's academic, behavior, so on and so forth. And then also use data to ensure equal access and opportunities are provided to all students. There's a lot of students out there that we, I feel, are missing, along with other districts, where they may not advocate for themselves, or the parents may not advocate for them, but we can use some data to find these kids and say, hey, you know, you have AP potential. We need to get you in here. You have acceleration potential. We can get you in here. So using data for that. And the last one, goal 3, provide students and staff with continuous technological supports. We want to build 21st century learners. So once again, continue with high quality PD, focus on a blended learning model. Review and purchase software that meets the needs of these learners. And then we've made a large investment in technology over the years, specifically recently with the pandemic and COVID-19. But monitor the inventory of devices and then plan for purchases. So 4 or 5 years down the line here, we're not looking at a bunch of devices that we can't replace and we're back to square one. So that's a really 30,000 foot overview of priority area 1 in the work that's been doing by the subcommittee.
Thank you, Mr. D. Any questions from the board? All right, let's hear from Mr. Mormon, who is co-chair for Priority Area 2.
All right, good evening, everybody. Our focus has been with partnerships with families, communities, and businesses, with the idea of reconnecting our community and our business organizations with the students and staff here in the school district. It is our purpose to be a community-based school system. Therefore, this is a very important area to focus on. You can see the 3 goals there at the top. Our first goal is focusing on increasing those meaningful and equitable engagement opportunities, and really looking for the interests and the strengths and the needs of our stakeholders in our school system. Some of the action steps that our subcommittee has discussed is really kind of taking a look at that opportunity to allow for focus groups. We know that our Parent Advisory Council is our primary focus group at this point, but exploring the option of having student-based focus groups, actually looking at ways to create opportunities for staff focus groups to provide feedback in our system, and then actually looking at the delineating between parents and community and providing opportunities for each group independently to provide some input into the resources that they would benefit from our school system. And then that would lead into that next action step of connecting the stakeholders to the resources that are needed and create our community-based schools. One of the bigger ideas that we've had that were floating around was creating something that might look like a parent resource center in certain central locations in our district, where parents can come in, print off report cards if they don't have internet access, come in and meet with a family and crisis therapist about parenting skills, could come in and connect with the Division of Family Services for social emotional support. So really kind of taking that information and the feedback and connecting it to the actual resources and delivering those to our community members. And then really focusing on continuous feedback through the use of targeted embedded surveys, really kind of looking at trying to establish some unique ways to gather feedback from our stakeholders. Moving into goal 2, really looking at respectful and reciprocal relationships. So trying to find ways to establish community-based events that may not necessarily always just happen in our schools. Looking at opportunities to hold events out in the community, identifying some of our more diverse and underserved populations and reaching out to them One of the things that were discussed was very similar to our food boxes during the pandemic when it first hit about 1.5 years ago. And going out to the communities and delivering services, delivering food, having events, making those connections there. And then really kind of continuing to promote our advertising and marketing. We have such a strong sense of Spartan pride here in the district, looking at creating opportunities for businesses to perhaps maybe contribute to the school system. And then, giving them some advertising through our resources, but then kind of being reciprocal and asking those businesses to help advertise the services that the Lake Forest School District can provide, which would ultimately help to, strengthen that connection and encourage our families to enroll their kids into the public school system here in Lake Forest. And then establishing outreach groups, not only, and this originally was, we kind of thought about school clubs and things of that nature, but a lot of suggestions were presented in looking at community-based clubs that are out there, finding ways to create two-way relationships to where school-based clubs and then community-based clubs can kind of interact with one another. And again, building those relationships. And then moving into goal 3, looking at building the opportunities for our students to explore career opportunities. So that would really drive through our career technical education programs, the pathways that are offered there at the high school. They actually start feeding there at Chittenden, and some of our business and our ag pathways begin there and carry over into the high school. Something that we're exploring that's brand new is the potential to add an ROTC program to the high school. And then the work-based learning programs, which are essentially your business-based internships that students can take advantage of. We saw a decent increase in enrollment in our work-based learning programs this year. And the high school has some very forward-thinking plans on how to expand those programs. So really building upon what we've already started there and trying to customize and find the steps that really kind of grow those programs. And then looking at expanding those opportunities to kids of all ages, career days, job fairs, things that even the elementary schools can get involved in, encouraging our businesses to visit elementary schools and present to elementary students about career choices and things of that nature. So really looking at strengthening those relationships through the businesses through there. So that's kind of the work that we've had to this point. Our next couple meetings will be focused on kind of refining these action steps and then building the metrics on how to measure our success with this.
Thank you, Mr. Mormon. Any questions from the board for priority area 2? Priority area 3, we've got our 2 subcommittee chairs here, Ms. Alexander and Mr. Sheehan. I'm not sure who's taking charge.
I'll start first.
All right, Ms. Alexander, thank you.
So we have priority area 3, school facilities, culture and climate. So our school facilities basically focuses on the physical school environment and the safety spaces. The culture is the way that our communities work together is set for beliefs and our values. And then our climate is how the school affects the students. So at the bottom, you have our previous meeting dates. We started in September and moved through October and November, and we had our last one in December. So the way that we kind of started is we first looked at our previous strategic plan and climate surveys and determined our goals, and which led us to our 3 goals. So we have our 3 goals there. And the first one talks about culture. And basically the culture one talks about meeting the needs of our whole learner, which includes but not limited to the academic, behavior, and the social supports. And the main thing is talking about basically providing those opportunities for all of our diverse learners. So when you look down at our action steps, the first one under culture is increase in stable student enrollment, looking at those projections for our future enrollment. Then we're looking at our adoption of a cohesive student code of conduct, decreases annual referrals, and increase our student supports in those behavior, academic, and social areas. And then the last one, utilizing those evidence-based equity strategies and making sure that we provide opportunities for all of our students. And there will be a Lake Forest school equity plan embedded in that. So I'll pass it on to Mr. Sheehan.
All right, our second goal focuses on climate, really looking at building and continuing to build a positive climate that is based around our district vision and as well as our mission statements and belief statement. And then really focus around the idea of Spartan pride, which we kind of define as engagement and development of school pride, whether it's at a school or at a district level. So looking at action steps that would support that goal would be just an overall positive climate, which is typically measured across the state using the Delaware School Climate Survey. The work that we would do with those measures would be to identify areas that we have not performed well in, and then build action steps and really action items that each school or the district would use to improve in those areas. Along those same lines, the work for high daily and annual student attendance. So looking at student subgroups, looking at daily attendance, looking at school attendance, and what can we do to have climate drive student attendance? How do we get kids to want to come to school? Our third measure there is looking at increased school choice into Lake Forest, and then kind of what our group has kind of deemed Spartans staying Spartans. So how do we keep kids from transitioning to other programs at different points of their educational career? So goal 2 and goal 1 definitely kind of intertwined. Lots of work that are going to be working together in there. And then our third goal, a little bit of a standalone, doesn't really go along, cleanly with climate and culture, but school facilities is definitely important. Maintaining the 21st century learning spaces, looking at innovative environments so that our kids can continue to learn in a safe and engaging place. Mr. Starr and the buildings and grounds crew are already working on this, each and every day. But their focus is on maintaining and improving existing facilities. Each school has a building level preventative maintenance plan that our chiefs and Mr. Starr, as well as the building administration, works to maintain throughout the year. Focusing on a prioritized 5-year facilities plan as the work of the board, I know knows, working to improve roofing, HVAC, and then there's also a lot of work around window replacement in that same facet there. And then kind of tapping into goal 1 with Mr. Dick's team, looking at aligning technology systems and infrastructure. So looking at the instructional needs of students beyond just computers, the example is great right here, this smart panel, that type of thing. How do we keep our facilities up the pace with technology?
And then our next steps, our next meeting will be in January, and then we will refine and develop our action steps and our strategies and put those measures in place.
Thank you. Any questions on priority area 3? All right, so what's next? So our subcommittees will continue to meet to develop these goals and action steps further. We're also working on an outward facing document. So that's going to be some kind of nice, aesthetically clean document that's easy to read, that is going to really generate and communicate all the work that we've done in the strategic plan, that we can communicate those intentions to the community, but also a district report card that, again, is accessible at all times. It's going to have all the metrics that are going to say, this is where we started, this is where we want to go, but this is where we're at right now, and in a real-time sort of district report card, so we can keep track of our progress and show our growth. Our whole groups meet monthly, and our subcommittees have been meeting out in our whole group meetings, so we can all sort of regroup and make sure the left hand knows what the right hand's doing, because a lot of there's hopefully we want there to be a lot of overlap between the 3 subcommittees, so that there's a lot of synergy created between what each team is doing, and they can connect all of their efforts together. And then our next update for this board will be February 17th, and we'll let you know the kind of progress and growth we've made between now and then. So any questions?
Any questions or for discussion for Dr. Lucas? Mrs. Stark.
I feel like when we talked about this, I don't know, maybe a couple months ago, we didn't have a lot of community support in the strategic plan committees. Like, have we been able to develop that, or how are these committees, like who's making up these committees for the most part?
Last night, I think we had about 25 members show up. We probably had less than 10 that were community members, parents, former board members. We haven't had the kind of community support we'd like to have, so we're still working on it. I'm still inviting people. I'm going to meet with the Rotary on Wednesday, so I'll be introducing them to our strategic plan and inviting them to get involved. Invite the community to be in part of strategic planning, because it's not too late. And we'd love to have more participation, but right now it is mainly educators that are putting this together.
Have we,
Ms.
just
McCloskey.
just a suggestion, have we thought about maybe sending out letters to small business owners within our community?
Sure.
Besides the ones that maybe just get, maybe specifically reaching out to people who their children may have gone through the district, work in the district, live in the district, but that actually own small businesses. I know I've heard from some that have just said like, oh, I'd like to get, but don't really know where to start. So maybe if we send a formal letter to somebody, maybe they would reach out to that. And just to follow up on that, because Mr. Mormon did mention about bringing, I saw in the strategic plan about the ROTC, and I know we sent out like a questionnaire kind of with that. Did we get good feedback with that?
Let's see, who would be a good person to ask? Mr. D, have we, I know our
Yeah,
first
you're
order.
asking me to reach back in my brain to the spreadsheet I looked at, so I don't get quoted on this. The survey went out, not as many, it went out to eighth graders also. I want to say, and it went out to the entire student body. I want to say about 70 kids responded back, but it was like 21, 22 that were really interested in an ROTC program. So the first thing that said to me is, I think we might need to, if we really want to get our numbers, instead of just sending it out to the student body and whoever fills it out, we may need to take some dedicated time, 10, 15 minutes during the class period, where they actually fill it out, where we can get some good numbers. But to answer the question, right around 70 people who responded, if my memory serves me right.
Mhm.
And like there was like 21 or 22 that said they'd be interested in the ROTC off that.
Okay.
Thank you,
Mhm.
Ms. McCluskey.
All right, so with all that said, I would like to acknowledge everyone that has put energy into this so far. It's clear that we are headed on a very positive trajectory. And whether you're staff or the member of the community who's helping, it is definitely appreciated. We're on to 3.2 financial reports. Mr. Kurt Kelly. Oh,
Good evening. All right, this evening we have the financial board report for November, so 5 months into the fiscal year. As far as the state funds go for the revenue side, we've only had 3 real changes up there in that top portion. We received what probably will be our final allocation for state transportation funds. So you see that change. The technology block grant, that's probably going to be the final allocation for our technology block grant. And then also our minor capital improvement money. One thing I do want to point out with the minor capital improvement money is that that's going to become very critical for us. The DOE did not approve or submit forward our certificate of necessity to OMB to be approved as one of the projects put forth for this fiscal year. So one of the comments that they had was basically that since it was very roof heavy intensive, that they were recommending that we use a lot of our emergency cares funds for some of that. So we're going to be looking at diverting some of the funds from our cares funds from the largest portion that we have away from some of the HVAC projects to some of these roofing projects. Now, we're still going to submit a certificate of necessity next year. But it seems to be that the only things that they've been approving these last couple of years have been for capacity or growth needs for the school districts. And so unless we're putting forth something in that realm, there's a very long shot that it's going to get approved. Now, that's been a big cry of the business managers across the state, is that we just do not have enough minor capital improvement money to continue to maintain these buildings, especially when they're not approving our certificate of necessities that include, major capital programs to do things like roofs that we can't cover under minor capital improvement. So we have seen some improvement in the dialogue there, and that some legislators are interested in putting some more money into the MCI program for next year. We're optimistic that, because that's probably the biggest area that the business managers across the state continue to harp on, is the fact that we just don't seem to have enough minor capital improvement money, especially when we've got this major capital improvement program that just is not getting projects approved when we need them to get approved. So those are the 3 items in the top on the state side that we received funding for. Down in the local funds section, you can see the debt service impact fee. That was the big change there. And that was we get an allocation probably 2 times a year. So that was the first one this year, and then the next one will be a little bit smaller. But I think I mentioned in our weekly report that we were the second largest check that was issued out of Kent County. I think Smyrna was probably the largest check, and then we were the second largest in terms of the impact fee check. So we were going to use a lot of that impact fee money for our certificate of necessity, but next year, as we go forth for another certificate of necessity, when we talk about adding on to Chipman for increased capacity there, we're not going to need nearly as much capital money for that project as if you had included in all the roofing projects. So that does free up some of our impact fee money to be used in other areas. And one of the areas that we do absolutely need to address is the pool resurfacing. So we're going to be taking care of that with our impact fee funds in the next 6 to 9 months, probably, to address that issue, because that's long overdue. The last time that pool was resurfaced was in, I believe, Thad said was 2008. So we're going to be coming up on 14 years before it's been resurfaced. And the last time it was resurfaced, they said it was supposed to last 10 years. So we're well past what the lifetime is on that. And the issue with that is going to be very expensive, just because they can no longer add layers of plaster to that pool resurfacing. They're going to have to remove anywhere from 2 to 4 layers. And that can get pretty expensive. So that's really the big change with the local funds. No changes really on the federal side. And as you can see, we're at 86% of all funds received compared to 92% last year. And really that's mainly that state local salary money that, because that's such a large budget number that it kind of skews everything. So any questions on the revenue side?
Questions on revenue for Mr. Kelvin? So one question and one comment. The equalization, the Division 3 equalization, is that follow a certain payment schedule? Current, like when do we? So we have $750,000 that we still anticipate receiving. Does that come any scheduled time?
The Division 3 equalization funding is broken up into like 3 or 4 different areas. So they've been, as the unit count got finalized, they've been transferring in our final allocations for that. So you will probably see that on the next board report. And then the next time we meet might be when I would present the final adjusted budget for the year. And but I still anticipate that we will get up there in terms of that equalization number of 5.7 million. So, but one of the reasons that they gave us such a small amount to begin with is they always preload. I believe it's 90% of the prior year.
Okay.
And the prior year was such a small number because we were so low on the unit count from the pandemic. So that's one of the issues there. But a lot of that money is already transferred and it just hasn't reflected yet. It's been coming in the last week or two, and it will continue to probably come in. So.
Okay. And then certainly the comment, as I heard you explain our certificate of necessity not being included, as I heard you explain the reasoning, it was not surprising, but at the same time still disappointing to where they'll point to the fact that there's another bucket of money that has been provided from another source for certain things that instead of the state offering assistance, that they pass the buck to that. So it's extremely disappointing.
Frustrating. Yes.
Frustrating, not surprising,
Mm-hmm.
but disappointing. So, thank you.
On the expenditure side, no real major changes here from the previous month. If we move down to the largest line, the Division 3 local salaries line, I mean, if 7 months left in the fiscal year, that would put us 58% of budget remaining. So that's exactly where they're at in terms of Division 3 local salary. So we're in pretty good shape there. Again, the rest of this page has really been no major movements in terms of the expenditures there. Everything's kind of on track. And then if we move on to the second page. Overall, for the discretionary funds, we're at 57% of the budget remaining. We were at 58% last year. Part of that is just because the schools are spending at a higher pace. even though last month was not a heavy spend month for the schools, overall, at this time in the fiscal year compared to last year, we're almost 50% higher for school spending than we were last year. And, that's part of that's a product of in-person instruction, so. And then moving down into the non-discretionary fund section. The other things I would really point out are debt service. We only have 29% of budget remaining, and that's just because all those debt service payments we have for our bond payments are pretty much front loaded in the front half of the fiscal year. So that is not a surprise to me. And then I think I mentioned it before, our tuition salaries are down a decent amount, so. But yeah, overall, 64% of budget remaining compared to 63% last year, so seems to be in good shape right now. Any questions?
Any questions on expenses or anything for Mr. Keller? Just back to the O&D topic real quick. I assume since we're in December that the budget hearings have already occurred, the O&D budget hearings.
So
for
the
DOE.
OMB departmental budget hearings have
Yes.
occurred, yes.
When you are aware of JFC schedule and when DOE's is, could you please pass that along?
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. All right, hearing no other discussion, we'll move on to 3.3 Superintendent Report. Dr. Lucas.
Thank you, Mr. Dempsey. Good evening again. As I love to do, I will start with celebration. I want to recognize and thank everyone connected to our transportation department, which includes Ms. Lisa Dawson and Mr. Dustin Weller, and of course, our drivers and contractors. Our bus drivers been among the most unsung of many unsung heroes in education, and they have truly been superstars. We just couldn't have had school this year without our transportation folks. So when you see them, thank them. They've done an amazing job this year. And when you see them on the road, make sure you slow down, respect their markings and signals. They have an extremely difficult job, which we can all make a bit easier by just driving respectfully and yielding to them whenever possible. As a reminder, our second marking period interims are available on the Home Access Center. Please reach out to your school. If you need paper copy, you cannot access HAC for some reason, or if you've got some concerns about your child's interim, please reach out to their school. Last day for students before the winter break is December 22nd, and we return to school on January 3rd. Please check our website for the most up-to-date calendar or call your home school to get accurate information. Finally, I want to remind everyone it's concert season. A lot of good concerts going on. Fine Arts are really working hard. So get out there and check out one of their great shows. And that's all I have. I yield back to President Dempsey.
Thank you, Dr. Lucas. Any questions or discussion, Dr. Lucas, Superintendent Report? All right, seeing none, move on to 3.4 LFEA Report. Mr. Ben Black. Welcome, Ben.
Thank you. Good evening. So as Dr. Lucas mentioned, the concert's going on right now, and our staff is very glad to be able to show off the work that they've done with the kids in the concerts. There were, I know the high school had 2, Chipman had theirs, and there's some coming up in the next couple of weeks as well. I've been present at them in one of my other roles, and it's been great to see it as well. Just have the parents in, and everything's going great. There haven't really been any problems. It's just nice to see. On top of that, I believe this is the last report I give before the end of the semester. So I can tell you the staff is very excited to be able to just have a little time to relax, and then they're going to come right back in on January 3rd, I believe. On January 3rd to jump right back into the first semester, finish things up so that we can get right into the second semester. Just continue with what we do. And in the spirit of the season, I just want to make sure that I express LFEA's appreciation for the relationships we have here at Lake Forest between the board, the administration, the staff, the community. We all tend to generally work together, get along really well, and we're very productive, and we really appreciate that. That's all I have.
Any questions, discussion for Mr. Black? So Ben, we appreciate that as well, and best wishes in the holiday to everyone. Thank you. All right, we are up to section 5, discussion items. Item 5.1, the 2021-2022 return to school. Dr. Lucas.
Good evening again. Schools remain open. We've been able to maintain operations at nearly normal levels, despite some serious shortages in everything from food in the cafeteria to staffing. But the teachers and support professionals in our schools are having to do double and triple duties in some cases. But thanks to their willingness to do whatever it takes to keep doors open, we have been able to do so. So let me take this opportunity to thank everybody who's out there in the trenches at those schools, really working hard to keep our kids in school. As I reported last month, we've begun our Test to Stay program here in Lake Forest. We just started that this week. About a dozen students have taken advantage of being COVID tested and then having to be able to attend school with a negative COVID test rather than having to quarantine. Next week, testing will be offered at 2 schools, Sunday through Thursday between 4 and 7 p.m. So that's Sunday night, take the test, it's negative, you can come to school Monday night, you take the test, you come to school Tuesday, and right on down the line. And it's open for all students who've been identified as close contacts. So that's who that testing is directed at, and free of symptoms. If you have symptoms, please don't come get tested, stay home. We're offering testing at different schools throughout the week as well. Each of our schools has a testing opportunity every day in the morning before school starts. And that is just, again, to try to stay ahead of the curve and just do everything we can to keep COVID-19 out of our schools. You can find information about this, everything COVID related here in the district on our website. Last thing I want to share is check your symptoms every day at the door. And if you're sick, stay home, especially if you have any cold or flu symptoms. Better safe than sorry. You stay home and you can come back and fight it out another day. That's all I have in our return to school for tonight. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Dr. Lucas. Questions or discussion for Dr. Lucas on return to school? So I just one item. Mrs. Starkey and I had the pleasure of attending jazz band concert Monday night. And it was mentioned or alluded to by the band director, and then received some parent comment afterwards. Along the lines that the jazz band typically does a tour of the other schools to perform for students this time of year, and part of it is to try to generate interest out of those students in the future. It seemed to, wasn't necessarily stated overtly, but maybe that has been taken away this year or declined. Could you give any background on that?
Sure. The jazz band, from my understanding, not last year, they didn't do it because of COVID. The year before, it has been a tradition that they would typically go and play at the schools. That, for lack of better, that wasn't addressed appropriately initially. And so we weren't able to support that with the jazz band this year. Number of factors, primarily being COVID and social distancing, that, a lot of not all of our elementary schools are able to support assemblies right at this time. So the jazz band, I've given them a couple of other ideas, ways that they can accomplish that same objective, and Mr. Patterson's working on that right now.
Okay. All right. Okay, thank you. We were on to section 9, personnel, Mr. Rao.
Section 9 personnel, make a motion to approve resolutions 9.1 through 9.3 as written.
We have a motion on the floor properly seconded. Questions or discussion on that motion? Seeing none, move to a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries 4-0.
Section 10 personnel retirements, and make a motion to approve resolutions 10.1 through 10.4 as written.
Second.
I have a motion on the floor properly seconded. Any questions or discussion on that motion? Seeing none, we'll move to a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries 4-0.
Section 12 personnel transfers, and make the motion we approve resolutions 12.1 through 12.4 as written.
Second.
A motion on the floor properly seconded. Any questions or discussion on that motion? Seeing none, we'll move to a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries 4-0.
Section 13, personnel offers of employment. I make a motion we approve resolutions 13.1 through 13.5 as written.
Second.
Have a motion on the floor properly seconded. Any questions or discussion on that motion? Seeing none, we'll move to a vote. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries 4-0.
Section 16, personnel leaves of absence. I make a motion we approve resolutions 16.1 through 16.6 as written.
Second.
Have a motion on the floor properly seconded. Any questions or discussion on that motion? Seeing none, we'll move to a vote. All those in favor? Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries 4-0.
Section 19, personnel administrative contracts. I make a motion we approve resolution 19.1. A 2-year new contract for Dustin A. Weller as written.
A motion on the floor properly seconded. Any questions or discussion on that motion? As traditionally done at this point, we will conduct contract renewals by a roll call vote. So seeing no discussion, we'll move to a vote. Mrs. McCluskey,
Yes.
Mrs. Starkey,
Yes.
Mr. Rao,
Yes.
and chair votes yes. Motion carries 4-0.
19.2, I make a motion we approve resolution 19.2, extending a 2-year contract to Aaron Dodson as written.
Have a motion on the floor properly seconded. Any questions or discussion on that motion? Seeing none, we'll move to a roll call vote. Mrs. McCluskey,
Yes.
Mrs. Starkey,
Yes.
Mr. Rao,
Yes.
and chair votes yes. Motion carries 4-0.
19.3, Kevin Truitt, I make a motion we approve resolution 19.3 as written, extending a 2-year contract to Kevin Truitt.
Have a motion on the floor properly seconded. Any questions or discussion on that motion? Seeing none, we'll move to a roll call vote. Mrs. McCluskey,
Yes.
Mrs. Starkey,
Yes.
Mr. Rao,
Yes.
and chair votes yes. Motion carries 4-0.
19.4, Nicole Curtis McDowell, I make a motion we approve resolution 19.4, extending a 2-year contract as written.
Second.
Have a motion on the floor properly seconded. Any questions or discussion on that motion? Seeing none, we'll move to a roll call vote. Mrs. McCluskey,
Yes.
Mrs. Starkey,
Yes.
Mr. Rao,
Yes.
and chair votes yes. Motion carries 4-0.
19.5, Douglas Brown, I make a motion to approve resolution 19.5 as written, extending the 2-year contract to Douglas Brown.
Second.
Have a motion on the floor properly seconded. Any questions or discussion on that motion? Seeing none, we'll move to a roll call vote. Mrs. McCluskey,
Yes.
Mrs. Starkey,
Yes.
Mr. Rao,
Yes.
and chair votes yes. Motion carries 4-0.
19.6, Monique Dupress, I make a motion to approve resolution 19.6 as written, extending a 2-year contract to Mrs. Dupress.
Second.
That motion on the floor properly seconded. Any questions or discussion on that motion? Seeing none, we'll move to a roll call vote. Mrs. McCluskey,
Yes.
Mrs. Starkey,
Yes.
Mr. Rao,
Yes.
and chair votes yes. Motion carries 4-0.
19.7, Evan Theophilou, I make a motion we approve resolution 19.7 as written, extending a 2-year contract to Evan Theophilou.
Second.
Have motion on the floor properly seconded. Any questions or discussion on that motion? Seeing none, we'll move to a vote. All those in, move to a roll call vote. Mrs. McCluskey,
Yes.
Mrs. Starkey,
Yes.
Mr. Rao,
Yes.
and chair votes yes. Motion carries 4-0.
19.8, John Reichenberg, I make a motion we approve resolution 19.8, extending a 2-year contract to John Reichenberg as written.
Second.
Have a motion on the floor properly seconded. Any questions or discussion on that motion? Seeing none, we'll move to a roll call vote. Mrs. McCluskey,
Yes.
Mrs. Starkey,
Yes.
Mr. Rao,
Yes.
and chair votes yes. Motion carries 4-0.
19.9, Brandy Short, I make a motion we approve a 1-year contract as written, extending the contract to Brandy Short.
Second.
Have motion on the floor properly seconded. Any questions or discussion on that motion? So I will say this is always my least favorite vote of the year. It's something we have to do procedurally, but because the contract renewal does not sync up timing wise with funding, that at this time of the year for this deck director position, that the board you will probably hear several no votes, and then this will come back to us in the May to June timeframe, once funding has been confirmed. So with that said, we will move to a roll call vote. Mrs. McCluskey,
No.
Mrs. Starkey,
No.
Mr. Rao,
No.
and chair votes no. Motion fails 4-0.
Section 20, personnel appointments. I make a motion to approve resolution 20.1 as written.
Second?
A motion on the floor properly seconded. Any questions or discussion on that motion? Seeing none, move to a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries 4-0.
Section 22, other business. I make a motion to approve resolution 22.1 school choice as written.
Second?
A motion on the floor properly seconded. Any questions or discussion on that motion? Seeing none, we'll move to a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries 4-0.
And section 24, other business financial reports. I make a motion we approve resolution 24.1, the financial report as presented this evening.
Second?
A motion on the floor properly seconded. Any questions or discussion on that motion? Seeing none, move to a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries 4-0. Thank you, Mr. Rao. Thank you, Mrs. Starkey. We are on, to section 26, board report or discussion items. Item 26.1, Delaware School Board Association. Mrs. Starkey.
Yeah, we have not met since the last time we've met. Our next meeting is January 5th after Christmas.
All right, thank you. Any questions for Mrs. Starkey? All right, thank you again. 26.2 Legislative Committee, Mr. Rao.
Same report, which is no report, no new meeting, and nothing new to report.
All right, thank you. Any questions for Mr. Rao? Thank you, Mr. Rao. 26.3 ECOP Policy Council, Mrs. Starkey.
That meeting is next week, December 16th at 6 o'clock, most likely virtual. So nothing new to report there.
All right, thank you. Any questions for Mrs. Starkey, ECOP Policy Council? All right. Thank you, Mrs. Starkey. 26.4, go to the order. Opportunity for board members to address any items not otherwise covered on the agenda. Floor is open. Mrs. McCloskey.
I just want to say that I did attend, DOA had a special education due process training for board members. I did attend that. It was informative. Polytech put it on. It was virtual. So I got that training done. It was worth listening to.
Great, thank you. Couple things I just wanted to mention. Number one, Dr. Lucas, I know that over the past few years, there's been some discussion about revising the athletic fee schedule at the high school. And I think specifically, I know from my standpoint, a lot of times when it was being addressed, it was kind of, in my opinion, too late to enact it for that school year. So if it is something on the table that we want to look at starting in September with our next fall sports season, would really I think the board would like to have that for discussion sometime in the spring. So we have plenty of time to make any notice of any changes. So we just voted on a substantial portion of administrative contracts. I want to congratulate everyone who just got a huge vote of support from the board, and do want to make sure that you all feel that is a vote of support. We are very ecstatic about where our district is headed, where we have come from, where we stand today. And it's really taken a team effort from everyone involved. So thanks to all of our administrators, and for everyone that was on the agenda tonight. We really look forward to a solid next 2 years with you. And if there's anything that this board can do for you, we are here for you. And then certainly this is our last meeting of the year. Our next meeting will not be until wrote it down. I already crossed it off like I addressed it. No wonder I couldn't find it. So Thursday, January 13th, 7 PM will be the next board meeting back here. But certainly that'll be after the holidays. So to everyone in the room and everyone listening and everyone who's not listening, certainly wish you all a very safe and happy, healthy holiday season, especially that break, because you will have all earned it by now. You will certainly have all earned it by then. So that's all that I have. Anyone else? All right, I do not believe we have a need for executive session, Dr. Lucas.
No, sir.
All right, then I will entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Second?
A motion on the floor properly seconded. Any questions or discussion on that motion? Seeing none, move to a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries 4-0. The board stands adjourned at 7:51. Happy holidays, everyone. Thank you.